many of which went late into the night, and we formally adopted our budget this past Monday. It's amazing when you don't have a whole lot of money, there isn't a lot of discussion about what you're going to do with it. And we do anticipate the mayor will be signing it shortly. I have to say, I've been through quite a few budgets, not only as a council member, but also when I served in the mayor's office, and this was one of the most difficult that I had ever seen. Our city is facing an enormous structural deficit, and I would not allow, as we talked about the future of our city, the tricks of the past, deficits that were papered over to create the impression of fiscal responsibility to be attempted again. We must simply be more disciplined in taxpayers' money. There were some cuts, but necessary cuts, I believe, in my opinion. I think I took the opportunity for us to look at long-term fiscal health of the city and wanted to make sure that we did structural change that ensured we would never have this kind of big deficit again. Because in your personal lives or businesses, you can't keep living on borrowed time, or in this case, borrowed money. Really, it is unacceptable. I think we've proposed some one-time fixes to get us through this next year, but it's going to really take even more real long-term solutions and systematic change in how our budgets are created, and some one-time fixes. So I want to talk to you about a few items specifically in the budget. We kept the funding for an additional 780 police officers, which puts us on the right track to reach our goal of 10,000 sworn officers in the next year or so, which I think is great news for us to be able to have 10,000. We expanded funds for gang prevention and intervention programs by $24 million, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about how we're going to utilize those funds in a much better way and make sure that we're using them for the kids instead of some of them being squandered. As mentioned, I'm chair of the Transportation Committee, and so we were able to provide money for 348 lights to be synchronized and 147 left-hand turn signals to be installed. I also believe that each of us as council members needed to take some personal responsibility, and in balancing this year, actually this fiscal year's budget, I gave $100,000 back out of my own city budget to the general fund to be able to balance the budget. And I'm particularly proud of some of my proposals that were adopted that help generate additional revenues without raising taxes for people, which I think is important. One is, and I think I have mentioned this before, the sale of city property into the general fund. The current policy of the city is that if you have a city building in your district, 50% of those funds go to the general fund, and 50% go into, and I'll call it the Wendy Greuel slush fund. I've not been so lucky actually to have any Wendy Greuel slush fund. I don't think that that is the proper way in which to dispose of those dollars or the use of those dollars. Because let's take a couple of examples. Number one, if you have no city buildings in your district, you get no benefit from that. Now, you know districts every 10 years get redistricted. So it may have been when we purchased the building 30 years ago, it may have been in Den Zion's district, in District 3, and now it happens to be in District 2, and I would benefit from that. And I think that's wrong. Unless there was some direct correlation to a problem that had occurred, and we do that with pipeline fees that go underneath some of the streets. They go direct, portion of that goes back to the district in which it's operating because they often are causing some of the problems in your streets and sidewalks to be used for that purpose. But for this year, that was not the case. 100% of the revenues generated from any surplus property goes into the general fund. Parking validation. Believe it or not, when I found that we are providing parking validation to some developers and others, and probably even some of you, if you go to building and safety, and planning department, up to the tune, I guess, citywide from other departments as well, of $350,000. I've asked that, in fact, we don't validate. In a tough time, we can't do that. Also, expanding advertising on our buses and trains. Our buses are able in the last year, just by adding in the back where we already have hardware, where there was PSAs, we raised close to $750,000 just by using that same place and selling. And I did give DOT a hard time because they told me we don't think it's a good idea to do advertising because people won't ride our buses if you had advertising in the back of the buses. And I told them that, with all due respect, I did not believe that was the case. I want to tell you some of the things that we fought for when we found some additional revenue that allowed us to save, for example, library Sunday hours. and 75,000 additional books, $3 million going back to the library department. Making sure that the 50/50 sidewalk program had another crew so that we could do more sidewalks in the city of Los Angeles. $250,000 for Laura Chick to do her audits on the gangs. $3.2 million for park rangers and for maintenance of our different parks. Money for news racks inspectors and illegal sign enforcement. And 5 more actual lights, traffic lights in the city of Los Angeles. There was only 10 included in the mayor's budget. But as I said, we have to look at some of the structural changes so that we ensure that this does not occur again. And some of the things I want to talk to you about, and some of which were been highlighted by Ron in his paper. One is overtime. We need to create a clear and efficient and cost-effective policy on overtime for every single department. And so we are looking at an ASTRA report to consolidate how that is taken in the city of Los Angeles. One major change in our budget related to LAPD, and I will highlight this, is LAPD every single year overspends on their overtime to the tune of about $16 million each year. Now, there's been a debate. The police department says for the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, they have overspent by $16 million because they've asked in their original budget for 1.2 million hours of overtime. And the city, in its infinite wisdom, has said, we can't afford that, so therefore you cannot have that overtime. And guess what? They still need that overtime, they use that overtime, and instead, every year, they come in having to, put their hat in hand, and we have to give them a hard time, when in fact we should just give them the 1.2 million hours, but say, you're gonna stay within that, and that's what the LAPD did this year. For the first time, the council did that, and the LAPD guaranteed that they would stay within that police overtime. The other is the study of mission creep. There's a lot of things the city does that we probably shouldn't be doing, and just have been added on every single year, and we haven't looked at zero-based budgeting to say, what does the charter say about what we should be doing in the city of Los Angeles, and what can we live without? Because we don't anticipate the economy getting any better in this region. Special events, frequent discussion in council and others. We simply need to be consistent. There is, and the numbers differ depending upon the Daily News said 11 million, the CLA says it's 5 million, whatever million it is, it's too much. And that we need to have a policy on the way in which we do special events.